For 45 years, the Livingston Awards have recognized exceptional reporters under 35 and have identified the next generation of groundbreaking journalists. That legacy continues with Hannah Natanson of the Washington Post, this year's Livingston Award winner for national reporting. Hannah won for her examination of the far reaching impact of the Trump administration's Department of Government Efficiency. She's here to talk to us about her meticulous work building a network of more than 1,200 confidential sources across the U.S. government, fielding dozens, sometimes hundreds of signal messages from sources every day. The stories that earned her the Livingston Award came out of the thousand conversations and the trust that she built along the way. Hannah, congratulations on being our Livingston Award winner for national reporting.
Thank you so much for this honor. Can't really believe it.
So I'd love to just have a conversation. Can you start by telling us what drew you to federal workers as the human lens for covering the Trump administration's reshaping of government?
I was an education reporter at the start of the year, and there were a lot of rumors swirling about how Trump wanted to shutter the education department, and I wanted to try to figure out a way that I could understand what might be happening, what the effects might be. And there was one particular tip that I no longer remember, but a dear colleague, veteran federal affairs reporter Lisa Ryan, suggested that I try posting in Reddit. And I found this forum for federal workers. And at the time, there were about 300,000 active users. And when I started scrolling, I was just so struck by the outpouring from human beings. They were trying to parse what was happening to them in real time, what the president's slurry of orders might mean. They were sharing anxieties for their families. And it sort of immediately became clear to me that this is a story both about policy and changes in DC that affect how most Americans live, but it's also a deeply human story about the people who work for the government and the stresses, anxieties, and changes they're facing. And that only was reinforced over the ensuing months as my sourcing gradually took off and I began hearing every day from different people. And the tips that would come in, sometimes they had to do with big scale changes Trump was making to the government. And again, sometimes it was just immediate human impacts on people. So I think pretty early from the beginning, I realized that was one way and an important way to capture this story.
Your stories were deeply human, but one of the things I appreciated about the reporting was that engaging with the story first, you showed policy change through very everyday consequences, things like delayed purchases, broken systems, family strained. How did you decide to approach it in that way, and how did you find those examples?
Every time I felt that I'd published a story that was relevant to federal workers, I would come back and share a gift link to the story and say, I'm covering these issues. I'm here if you want to talk, and I can do my utmost to keep you confidential. And what ended up happening again was this slew of information. So every day I was getting, again, between dozens and hundreds of messages. And some, like I said, were broad strokes. The president did this thing, he changed this policy, but so many more were little human details. The fridge stopped working and we don't have the funds to get a replacement anymore. I tried to order a basic vendor and it's taking a week to 2 weeks where normally it would have taken 1 to 2 days. I'm at NASA. I tried to buy fastening bolts and it's taken 6 rounds of emails. And so what often happened was I was hearing from all across government, like in a fire hose rush all the time. I had so many agents. I had more than 120 at least different agencies where people had found me from. And so it was sort of about the idea of covering this through the human impact and little details was just a natural outcropping of just the flood of information that I was getting.
And while all of this was going on, of course, you were also dealing with a very real possibility of retaliation.
So when I spoke with sources, I never minimized the risks. I stated what I understood the risks to be as far as I knew them. I explained that, for me to use you as a source, I need to be able to verify that you are who you say you are, that you work where you work. So at least once I'm going to need to see proof of identity. And so, in consultation with Post lawyers, we sort of came up with a system that we felt was as safe as possible, which is I would verify folks' identities by briefly seeing their government ID, either in a photo, that would delete, or on a video call. And then when I took notes on any conversations, I would use nicknames by people's agencies. I'd title them by their agency in the signal chats. And, I was just as careful as possible. I put all my devices in the most secure lockdown mode that I possibly could. And I explained all this to sources. I explained all the precautions I was taking. I explained what I understood the risks to be. And they were often already very aware of the risks they were facing by talking to me. And I never sugarcoated anything. I just said, this is what I understand you might be running the risk of. These are the steps I'm taking to try to keep you as protected and as confidential as possible. And we just sort of talked about it. And I did occasionally have people back out. They decided they weren't comfortable with this. They weren't even going to tell me their identity once, so I couldn't use them as a source. Or, this happened a lot as the year went on. People who'd been good sources just decided it was too risky and they needed to delete Signal. Sometimes they told me, sometimes they just deleted Signal. But I do want to emphasize that, still more than 1,000 people sort of stuck through it with me for a really long time. And I want to thank them for their trust and for their bravery. And I'm still doing my utmost to merit that trust, which I can never, it's the highest honor I will ever receive. And I can never do enough to merit it.
More than 1,000 people sticking with you in and of itself is a real testament to your reporting and to the confidence that you built with your sources. What did you learn through the whole process about the goal of quote efficiency and what that ended up meaning in the administration and what that ended up meaning for people's lives and their work and the distance between those interpretations?
Well, the goal of efficiency, what I learned from my sources who I was speaking to, so I had this played out, is that in broad terms, a lot of them agreed with the stated idea of streamlining government, making it more efficient, and rooting out. Everyone agreed there was fraud, there was waste. I think what people observed to me over the course of the year, especially when the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, was most active, is that even though that's what they were saying they were doing, often the activities of that group seems to be more targeted towards the president's partisan or political priorities. What people said is that it felt like what it ended up doing was all too often, in fact, making things more inefficient or just deleting parts of the government. And there would have been a way to do this that career bureaucrats would have been happy to help with, that would have involved really sitting down to understand how government functioned, what was working well, what wasn't working, what could be improved, how you could bring the power of technology to bear on making things more streamlined, including updating really antiquated systems. But that would have required taking the time to sit down first and understand what government was. And instead, what ended up happening is a bunch of people came in and they broke it before they understood it.
Can you tell us about Brandon Beckham and what his story was and how that relationship developed?
He was a federal worker in Nevada. He worked for the Bureau of Land Management. He was a remote worker. And last year, he voted for Trump around the same time that his wife, 2 years ago at this point, he voted for Trump around the same time that his wife entered hospice care at home. She was dying of cancer. And he went on leave to care for her at the same time that the Trump administration took power. And he sort of tried to not pay attention because he was focusing on his wife, Mikkel, and he has 3 children. He was focusing on them as well. But he did become aware that the president he had voted for seemed to be intent on, in his view, dismantling the government that he worked for. And so what ensued over the next couple of months, as his wife died, is it became clear to him through news reports that his job was going to be targeted in a couple of different ways, including being required to go work in person in an office. And for him, who'd been hired remote and who lived in Pahrump, Nevada, that meant driving more than 70 miles to Las Vegas every day, because that's the nearest federal building that they would allow him to work in. And that would have meant losing 3 hours at least round trip with his wife and his children. And he was unwilling to do that. And so that's actually when he reached out to me. He gradually came to feel that the Trump administration was making an error. Again, he's a fervent Trump supporter, and he also is a fervent JFK fan. And so there was a speech that he liked to listen to of JFK's where JFK would quote, he would drive around the desert trying to process the ongoing death of his wife. And he would listen to JFK speeches. And one of the quotes was about how an error does not become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. And he's also a very strong believer in God and a very devout Christian. And he came to feel that his case was a chance to show the Trump administration that it was making an error in how it was treating federal employees like him, and that it was his chosen mission, with everything going on, to point that out so they could correct the error before it became a mistake.
I have serious concerns about President Trump's commitment to ensure 10-year service award. I'm disappointed in this administration, specifically President Trump's failure as a leader to ensure, abandoning his commitment to ensuring that the common person is protected.
And you shared the story so powerfully with a video diary. What was it like talking to him about including that? And how did he feel about it afterward?
Eventually I went out to Nevada and I sat with him and we read through diary entries, and some he didn't want me to read, which I respect. But most he let me read. And so we were sitting there and I was reading them and he was tearing up and I was tearing up. And there's a particular entry that's in the story where he writes about his experience taking his wife to the bathroom and sort of realizing she's very close to death.
It just brought tears to my eyes. A realization within myself. This is too hard and an emotional tragedy to bear. And I realize that I'm not strong enough in my human capacity.
And afterwards, he ended up, I think, being really pleased with, he felt that it was the right thing to do. Based on the outreach he got, the outpouring I got, he did feel that he'd made the right call to be that vulnerable, but it's not easy.
Covering a topic like this that is innately polarizing because of the state we're in as a country right now, and how you approached the writing, the reporting, the cultivation of sources, and the engagement around the work so that the largest possible audience of people would be able to come to it, if not with no point of view before they started reading, because of course people come with their point of view, but so that people could engage with it honestly and hopefully openly.
Yeah, and I want to give huge credit to my editor last year, Mike Madden, who helped me think through these things before reporting, when considering what stories to do, certainly during the editing. He was just phenomenal in helping me ensure that we were fair. And it's a great way you phrased that question. I really did want this, the way that the Trump administration was reshaping government affected all Americans. It didn't matter what political stripe. It didn't matter whether you voted for him or not. And I was trying to tell stories that showed that to all Americans. And so I really wanted it to be as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. For example, with Brandon's story, I think it was pretty important, honestly, that he is a Trump supporter. And I know, because I got emails from people, there were people that story reached who might not have read a similar story about, a more left-leaning government worker who had been all against Trump from the start. And I was trying to tell stories about all different kinds of people in all different kinds of political situations that would reach people on all different sides of this who were being affected in all different kinds of ways.
Can you give us some sense of how readers responded? And and did the series succeed in instilling that sort of appreciation or curiosity, fascination in the people you were trying to reach with the work?
My favorite thing is when someone writes in to say a story I did changed how they see something, or best of all, changed how they see the world and how they see themselves in it. And the number of people who sent me messages like that after Brandon's story, after stories about different parts of government. There was a story that I did about people fleeing government and about all the expertise we'd lost, where I had people writing in to say, like, I didn't realize the government did that, or I didn't realize it had people like that.
So, of course, this leads to the question about, I asked before about your source's fear of retaliation. You've also experienced retaliation because of this reporting, and the FBI raided your home, seized your devices. How has your life and your work, how has it changed in the past year since you started on this course of reporting, and how do you continue doing your work?
My lawyers have said that I cannot discuss my case beyond what's publicly known. So, I mean, I can clearly say that my devices are still in the possession of the government. The source base that are built has chilled. I went from having dozens to hundreds of messages to nothing, pretty much. And of course, the Post is still in court, working to protect the First Amendment and my sources and my devices as best as we can. And it's been, I've spent a lot of time with lawyers and continue to do that. So it's been a weird year, and I'm holding on to hope, but sometimes it feels like just barely.
And we should note that, of course, against the backdrop of these professional and personal challenges to you, the Post as an institution has faced great challenges and has been through in February enormous cuts to the staff and kind of a change in the structure of the organization. But during this time, it really done everything it can to protect you legally and defend your rights and the rights of all journalists around these issues.
And I want to emphasize that. And I have had on my case nothing but full support from the very top of the organization, including Jeff Bezos, including Matt Murray, including the now publisher Jeff D'Onofrio, and before he left, Will Lewis, the other publisher. And without getting into the cuts and people's concerns about the Post, which I fully understand, I do want to emphasize that they are doing literally everything they can, and I have felt supported in every way possible from the minute this happened. The morning this happened, I would, it was made clear to me that the Post was behind me, and that remains the case.
I think, your work has been really inspiring over the past year and has illuminated just in a year in which there's just been an avalanche of news
Right.
and change and challenge coming at us all the
Right.
time. Even those of us who are voracious news consumers, it's been so much to wade through, and the clarity with which you approached your work and relating the complex workings of the government to us all in a way that we could not only understand, but also, really connect to and feel empathy around, and curiosity has been amazing. Congratulations on being our Livingston winner for national reporting. We look forward to everything that is to come for you. Thanks so much.
Thank you a million times over.